They mocked us. The galaxy's most advanced species laughed at Earth's so-called primitive medical tech, especially our band-aids. They called them stickers for children. Harmless. Outdated. A joke. But everything changed the day one of their warriors lay dying from a plasma wound no alien doctor could close, and a human calmly pulled out a little strip of adhesive from his kit. What happened next would rewrite everything they thought they knew about us. They say war reveals the truth in every civilization, but no one expected it to reveal ours through something as simple as a band-aid. The galactic battlefield at Epsilon Theta was chaos. Smoke curled through the air. Ships were ablaze in orbit, and wounded soldiers from multiple worlds cried out in pain. The coalition medics, mostly Eularians, Skorviks, and Arathal, rushed between stretches with advanced tools, injecting regeneratives, stimulating nerves, applying nanogel that shimmered like oil. And yet, one of their own, a Skorvik commander named Trakuan, lay dying. A plasma wound tore across his chest, searing his flesh and destroying the internal regenerative cells. Their technology couldn't seal it. Their science, advanced as it was, couldn't reverse the cascade failure of Trakuan's biocircuitry. They were panicking. Eularian screamed into comms for an evac. An Arathal healer dropped her nano-kit in frustration. "There's nothing more we can do," she hissed in her musical tongue. "He will perish." And that's when Dr. Martin Hale stepped forward. Human. Calm. Wearing stained combat fatigues and a patched-up medpack. He had no nanotech. No biofoam. No molecular fuses. Just a small, red kit he'd carried since med school on Earth. "What are you doing?" a Skorvik snapped as Hale knelt beside Trakuan. "Helping," Hale said simply. He pulled out a band-aid. Laughter erupted from the aliens nearby. Even in panic, they couldn't help it. "Is this your idea of a joke?" the Arathal healer asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "That tape won't do anything. That's human superstition." But Hale didn't respond. He peeled the wrapper, revealing a simple adhesive strip, flesh-colored, barely an inch long. Carefully, he cleaned the wound with antiseptic from a tiny bottle. Then, with precision born from experience, he pressed the band-aid over the worst part of the plasma band. For a moment, nothing happened. The air was tense. The Skorvik warrior's breathing was ragged. His vitals dipped. Then, they stopped falling. The wound, instead of continuing to destabilize, held. The bleeding slowed. The tissue began to stabilize, far faster than with any alien treatment. A faint glow pulsed from beneath the band-aid, something none of them expected. What is that?" the Arathal healer breathed, kneeling closer. Dr. Hale didn't look up. "It's hydrocolloid gel, embedded with microdoses of silver ions, anti-inflammatories, and, get this, a small electromagnetic mesh that promotes cellular cohesion. Earth tech, designed for burn trauma." "But it's so small," the Eularian whispered. "Small doesn't mean weak," Hale replied. "That's something humans figured out the hard way." The aliens watched in stunned silence as the warrior stabilized. Minutes passed. Then Trakuan's eyes opened. He groaned, then sat up slowly, coughing but alive. A Skorvik officer dropped to one knee in disbelief. From that moment on, the perception of human medical science shifted. They had mocked our band-aids, called us primitive. But now, the Coalition was requesting crates of them. Earth's field medics became legends, the patches, they called them. Soldiers across the stars began requesting the sacred strips before missions. And Dr. Martin Hale, he became a symbol, a reminder that sometimes, the simplest solution carries the weight of genius behind it. Humanity had always been underestimated in the galaxy, not because of our lack of technology, but because of our creative resilience. We didn't need shiny tools or glowing nano-orbs. We needed what worked. And when that meant a band-aid, then damn it, a band-aid was what we used. Even now, years later, Skorvik training manuals include the Earth method. It starts with sterilization and ends with a band-aid. What they once laughed at, they now swear by. Dr. Hale didn't see himself as a hero. After the incident, when news spread across star systems, he kept his head down and returned to his rounds, tending to the wounded. He still carried that same old medpack. The only difference now was that everywhere he went, alien soldiers eyed the red cross on his sleeve with newfound reverence. Some even bowed slightly when he passed. At first, he found it ridiculous, until a Skorvik child, one of the refugee evacuees, ran up and offered him a drawing. It was a picture of him holding a Band-Aid, with alien and human hands reaching toward it. The coalition's medical boards launched an inquiry. How had Earth's low-tech solutions succeeded where high-tech medicine failed? What they discovered shocked them. Human healing wasn't just physical, it was holistic. Our approach combined biology, psychology, and centuries of field improvisation. The Band-Aid, as primitive as it looked, was a culmination of that philosophy. Protect, soothe, and let the body do what it does best, heal. The plasma wound incident became a case study. Soon, other human inventions began gaining traction. The ice pack, once considered archaic, became a recommended treatment for alien muscular injuries. Vapor rub confused the aerotol at first, but after it eased the breathing of a general suffering from nebular lung rot, demand spiked galaxy-wide. Even chicken soup packets, yes, soup, were packaged for distribution among recovering soldiers. But not everyone welcomed the change. In the inner halls of the Zenit Medical Guild, a council of the most elite healers in the galaxy convened. They were furious. Centuries of research, billions of credits in biotech, and all of it eclipsed by a Band-Aid. It's a public relations stunt, one hissed. They're romanticizing backwater witchcraft. But the evidence was irrefutable. Mortality rates among units with human medics dropped by 42%. Recovery times improved. Morale skyrocketed. And perhaps most damning of all for the Guild, alien patients began requesting human treatments, even when advanced options were available. It wasn't just about the tools. It was the K. Humans didn't treat injuries like broken machinery. They treated them like emotional events. A Skorvik commander later described how Hale stayed with him long after the wound was patched, talking him through the pain, ensuring he stayed calm. He didn't just heal my body, the commander said. He healed my fae. One night, in a recovery tent orbiting the shattered moon of Veritas, Hale sat with a group of young cadets, alien and human alike. They asked him about Earth, about why humans insisted on wrapping wounds in cloth, boiling herbs, singing to patients. He smiled. Because, he said softly, healing is part science and part soul. The cadets fell silent, absorbing that strange human wisdom. In a galaxy that had long worshipped sterile efficiency, Earth had reintroduced something precious, compassion. And so the legend of the Band-Aid grew. Not as a miracle cure, but as a symbol. It reminded soldiers that hope could be small, that healing didn't need to shine or hum. Sometimes, it just needed to stick close to the skin, warm and gentle, whispering, "You're going to be okay." Soon, artists sculpted monuments of human medics. In the Grand Plaza of Teleprime, a 20-foot statue of Dr. Hale now stands, a Band-Aid held aloft in one hand, his other arm extended outward, palm open. The inscription reads, "In our darkest hour, it wasn't lasers or serums that saved us. It was kindness, wrapped in adhesive." And beneath that, in smaller Earth text, a single phrase, "Stick with us." Years passed. The war that had once ravaged the stars slowly faded into history books and memorials. But the ripples from that one moment on the battlefield, the moment a human placed a Band-Aid on a dying alien warrior, continued to shape the galaxy. The Coalition, once a patchwork of alien species with little regard for Earth's contributions, began adopting Earth-based medical protocols across its military and civilian hospitals. Medical academies from Xanis to Deltor Prime started offering electives in Terran healing practices. These courses taught more than how to use human tools. They taught human presence, the act of holding a hand during pain, the importance of a soothing voice during trauma, the psychology of hope in recovery. Earth, once mocked for its lack of technological elegance, became a pilgrimage site for medics across the stars. Cities like Geneva, Tokyo, and Nairobi saw floods of alien students walking the halls of teaching hospitals. The Mayo Clinic's alien exchange program grew so massive it had to be relocated to an orbiting platform. And everywhere, they asked the same question. How did the humans make something so small, so powerful? Dr. Hale, now older and retired from active duty, was quietly tending a small free clinic on the lunar colony of Armstrong Outpost. He avoided the spotlight, but the universe wouldn't forget him. One day, a delegation arrived. Skorvik, Arathel, Yularian, even a high-ranking Zenit elder. They came not as rivals, but as grateful patients, as colleagues, as believers. With them, They brought a proposal, the founding of the United Galactic Institute of Human Healing, a center that would blend the best of advanced alien technology with the humble, enduring spirit of Earth medicine. They asked Hale to be its first chancellor. He declined the title, but agreed to oversee the philosophy behind it. "Let the young ones lead," he said. "I'll just make sure they never forget why it matters." Under his guidance, the Institute built a new generation of hybrid healers, doctors who carried surgical lasers and gauze, who could deploy nanobots while humming a lullaby to calm a child. Interstellar medics began carrying compassion kits, inspired by the human field medpacks, which always included Earth-standard Band-Aids, still produced in factories in the American Midwest, now exported to over 100 worlds. It wasn't just medicine that changed. Politics shifted. Cultures softened. The alien races, who had once measured strength in the size of ships or the scale of weapons, began to recognize another kind of power, the strength to care for one another, across blood and bone, across language and light years. There were still skeptics, of course. Still those who scoffed at the idea that a sticker could become a symbol of peace. But even they fell quiet when their own families healed under human hands. The Band-Aid became more than a tool. It became a symbol of interstellar unity. It was embossed on the flags of new peacekeeping medical fleets. It appeared in art, music, even literature across the stars. Poets wrote of its silent promise. Veterans carried their first Earth-applied Band-Aid in locket-sized cases, worn like medals. Children, alien and human alike, traded colorful Band-Aids like stickers, each one carrying a story of comfort and courage. And though Dr. Hale passed quietly in his sleep many years later, a small adhesive strip was placed on his hand by a young alien nurse who had trained at his side. Not out of necessity, but out of respect. His funeral was attended by thousands. In every corner of the galaxy, a moment of silence was held. And in that silence, trillions remembered not just a man, but an idea. That healing isn't always loud. That strength isn't always about size. And that sometimes, in the vast cold of space, all you really need is something small, something gentle, and something that says, "I see your pain. I will help you through it." A Band-Aid. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Stars lived and died. And the galaxy moved on, as it always does. But in the quiet corners of space, in orbiting clinics and mobile field hospitals, the legend of Earth's Band-Aid endured. On the outer edge of the Orion expansion zone, a young healer named Relani, of the crystalline Teari species, moved quickly through the triage tents of a refugee colony ship recently struck by asteroid fragments. Her hands, glowing faintly with her kind's bioenergy, worked with precision. She stitched, stabilized, scanned, and then she found him, a child, human, unconscious and bleeding from a jagged gash down his forearm. The wound wasn't fatal, but it was raw and deep, and he trembled in pain even while unconscious. Relani's advanced medical tools whirred to life, but she paused. Instead of reaching for a scalpel-thin injector or nanobot sprayer, she opened a small leather pouch hanging around her neck. Inside were 3 Earth-made Band-Aids, the packaging faded but intact. A gift passed down through generations of medics, an inheritance of belief. She knelt and gently cleaned the boy's wound. Around her, assistants murmured, confused. "You're not going to use plasma sealant?" one asked. Relani shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. This is better." With care, she peeled the adhesive and placed the Band-Aid over the deepest part of the cut. A warm hum passed through her fingers, just as her teacher had once described. Not a machine's vibration, but something subtler, the warmth of intent, of compassion made manifest. The boy's breathing eased. The bleeding slowed. And then, just as before, the wound began to close. Not just from the gel, or the silver, or the ions, but from the energy shared between healer and patient. The assistant stared, stunned. "How? That's ancient tech." Relani smiled. "It's not the tech that heals. It's the tradition." Later that night, with the child safe and sleeping, Relani recorded the moment in her log. Entry 4321, used the second Band-Aid. "One remains. I will save it for someone truly in need. One day, perhaps, I will return to Earth and ask for more." Across the stars, in thousands of other places, similar moments unfolded. Holo statues of Dr. Hale still stood, now weathered by time but never forgotten. The United Galactic Institute of Human Healing had grown into a vast web of knowledge-sharing, its motto etched above every entrance. In compassion, we are united. In simplicity, we find strength. And on every student's desk, no matter their species, sat a small box, standard issue, of Earth Band-Aids. Sometimes they were never used. Sometimes they were passed down. But every medic, every healer, carried one with reverence, because in a galaxy of blinking lights and roaring engines, they knew what truly mattered: the human heart behind the healing. 500 years later, the human homeworld was no longer just Earth. Colonies now thrived on Mars, Europa, Tau Ceti Prime, and dozens more. But Earth was still remembered, not for its power, but for its principles. And in orbit around the pale blue dot, aboard a station called Sanctuary, an archive floated silently among the stars. Sanctuary wasn't a military base or a political outpost. It was a living museum of medicine, the most sacred site in the galaxy for those who practiced the art of healing. Inside its halls were preserved the original items that had shaped galactic healthcare: the first regenerator, the first neural fuser, the first alien-to-alien transplant log. But in its central chamber, encased in a clear field of stasis, sat the smallest artifact of them all: the original Band-Aid that Dr. Hale had placed on Trakuan's chest during the war. It was browned with age, its adhesive long dried, but it remained untouched. Beneath it, a plaque read, "The wound that healed the galaxy." Every new healer, be they crystalline, silicon-based, flesh, or machine, made pilgrimage to that chamber. They didn't come to see the technology. They came to understand, to kneel in the presence of a reminder that sometimes it wasn't a miracle serum or a cosmic breakthrough that changed the fate of civilizations. Sometimes it was empathy, wrapped in gauze, sealed in hope. On Sanctuary's 500th founding day, a ceremony was held. Healers from over 300 species stood shoulder to shoulder in the Zero-G auditorium, floating gently as orchestras of bioluminescent Arathani played memory tones in the background. A speaker, descended from the same Skorvik warrior once saved by Hale, rose to address the assembly. "My ancestor was not just healed," he began, his voice deep and vibrating through the floor. "He was seen, not as a soldier, not as a specimen, but as a being in pain, worthy of gentleness. That was humanity's true gift. Not the Band-Aid, but the courage to care when all others had given up." Silence followed, and then applause, silent, respectful, and universal. The speaker stepped down and passed the floor to a young girl, human, no more than 16, chosen to recite the oath of hands, the galactic healer's pledge derived from Earth's Hippocratic roots. She placed her hand on a replica of Hale's medpack and spoke the final line: "I will not turn away from pain, no matter how small. I will not mock the wound. I will answer it." Tears fell. Not just human tears, crystalline droplets, vaporous streams, energy pulses of grief and grace. It was a shared ritual, one that bound the galaxy in unity. In the centuries to come, more advanced technologies would emerge: regeneration capsules, tissue cloning drones, even programmable healing via quantum field manipulation. But even then, every medical kit, military or civilian, still contained a simple section labeled "Emergency, Human Method." Inside, there would always be a Band-Aid, not because it was the best tool, but because it reminded every healer, in every dark hour, that there was once a time when the most powerful act in the universe was to place a small strip of kindness over someone's wound. Millennia passed. The stars shifted in the night sky. Civilizations collapsed and were reborn. Languages evolved. Whole planets were terraformed, lost, and rediscovered. But through the tides of time, some stories refused to fade. On the lush green world of Ione 4, under the shade of towering, bioluminescent trees, a small gathering of children, of all species and shapes, sat in a circle around an old storyteller. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of ages. She was a lawkeeper, a role older than the colony itself. They called her Nali of the 9 Hands, for the many healing limbs she bore, each a different species' legacy. She wasn't a doctor in the traditional sense. She was a memory bearer, a preserver of stories once called truth. She leaned forward and held up a small, ancient object sealed in crystal. It was no bigger than a fingertip. Worn, faded, familiar. "Children," she said, Do you know what this is? They leaned in. A tiny trillion girl with gossamer wings blinked. It's a band-aid, she whispered, reverent. Nali nodded. Yes. And do you know why we honor it? Hands rose. The answers came quickly. Because it healed a warrior. Because it saved the galaxy. Because it made people believe in humans again. Nali smiled, her voice warm like a blanket of stars. Yes, but more than that. It showed us that the greatest medicine does not always come from the strongest tools, or the most dazzling lights. It comes from the will to help, even when you have nothing left but your bare hands and hope. She turned the crystal slowly, the band-aid catching the sunlight like a relic of a forgotten age. There was once a man, a human, a healer with no weapons, no armor, just a little kid, and a heart that could not be hardened, even by war. Gasps escaped the children's mouths, even though they'd heard this story many times before. They hung on every word. And when he knelt on that battlefield, Nali continued, the gods of war laughed. The medics fled. The machines failed. But he stayed. And with this small patch of cloth and adhesive, he told the universe, I will not let you die. The silence that followed was complete. Then Nali leaned close, her voice nearly a whisper. They say, when he passed from this world, the stars themselves wept. That every healing hand, from here to the edge of the dark spiral arms, trembled with the loss. But his gift did not die, because what he taught us cannot die. A boy raised his hand. He had metallic scales and golden eyes. Is it true, he asked, that the stars named a constellation after him? Nali's eyes twinkled. Yes. Look to the southern sky tonight, and you'll see it. It's called the healer's hand. 5 stars, spread like fingers, holding a 6th, a tiny dot of light between them. That's the Band-Aid star. The children turned their eyes to the sky instinctively, even though the sun still shone above. Now go, Nali said softly. And remember, you carry his legacy. Every time you offer kindness, every time you kneel beside the wounded, every time you choose care over cruelty. As they scampered off, laughing and dreaming, Nali looked down once more at the Band-Aid in crystal. She touched it with one finger, and for a moment, a flicker of ancient warmth traveled through her hand. Far away, aboard a drifting archive ship orbiting a dead star, a hologram flickered to life, one that activated once every century. It showed a man kneeling on a battlefield, placing a strip of hope over a fatal wound. His eyes were tired, but calm. He looked up at the camera, and his recorded voice spoke. If you're watching this, then someone, somewhere, still believes healing matters. That's enough. That's always been enough. The message ended. The light faded, and the galaxy, in its endless spinning, carried the story on, not just as a memory, but as a promise.